Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new malicious compliance content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
First one is titled, Whatever Chainsaw I Want You Say. This malicious compliance is not my own, but of a friendly vindictive old man who I'll call Fred that I worked with for around 5 months. As many of you know, I, male 18, do tree work for a living, and have for around 2 years now. My boss, who I'll call Duncan, is a 32-year-old hotshot and the owner of our small company, who can sometimes be a real tool when things aren't going fast enough on a job. Now Duncan has an old family friend named Fred. Fred worked with Duncan's stepfather at a cement plant for 20 years, and is his stepfather's best friend. Fred also retired from said cement plant. Fred is the kind of man who would give you the shirt off his back, while being an absolute vindictive smartass about you not having a shirt. However, Fred was working for Duncan as a favor, since Duncan was understaffed at the time. Because of this, Fred couldn't give a flying duck about his job or what Duncan said or did. Fred took as many breaks as he wanted, when he wanted to, and wouldn't hesitate to tell you where to stick your opinion if you said something about it. Fred is also a complete bull of a man, who stands at a hearty 6 feet 3 and 275 pounds, and easily makes Duncan, 5 feet 10 and 160 pounds, look like a shrimp, so usually Duncan isn't too quick to bother him. So one day we were all doing our thing on the job. We had a big ol' pin oak to take down, so we were all in our usual positions. Jake up in the bucket truck, James running our loader, and Fred in first chipping brush and shooting the breeze, although I'll admit we were slightly slacking off. Duncan decided he was going to sharpen all of the chainsaws that were not currently in use, so he gets to work. Now for those of you who don't know, sharpening a saw take a while, and on top of that all of our saws were extremely dull. So they took a lot of sharpening, in 95-degree heat, while being stooped down on the door of one of the boxes on our bucket truck. Duncan was sharpening saws for the better part of 2 hours, 8 saws. When he finished we had the vast majority of the tree cut down, all of the branches were off and Fred and I had long since shut down the chipper, and were taking our lunch since we had nothing to do, as wood is moved from the ground to the dump trailer by James in the loader. For some reason the fact that we had 20 minutes more work infuriated Duncan. This is especially odd because the tree was coming down very quickly compared to usual, as it was Friday and we were all hoping to cut off early as we sometimes did. Duncan flew off the handle, screaming at us for the better part of 10 minutes, which ironically extended us to 30 minutes more on the job rather than 20. And he ended his tirade with, "I'm leaving to go do estimates finish and go cut firewood at the yard. You will not be cutting off a second before 3:30. As Duncan stormed away, Fred piped up from the back of the group just as sweet as pie with anticipation dripping from his voice. "Hey lipstick, which saw do you want us to use?" To which Duncan replied, "I don't give a duck," and stormed away. Me and Fred smiled at each other, thinking the same thing. When we arrived back at the yard we began getting saws off the truck, from the smallest of trim saws to the largest brand spankin' new Stihl Mississippi 881, Magnum with a 42 in bar that we used to cut particularly large stubs. Me and Fred both grabbed a saw, and fired them up. We began to cut, and cut, and cut, and cut. For almost 3 hours we cut firewood, making sure to hit the dirt with the saws as much as possible, and going through every saw, until they were almost unusable from how dull they were. Trust me, if anyone knows how to dull a saw quick, it's a tree professional. Fred and I were having the time of our lives, dancing and singing and cracking jokes while we cut, while screaming to be heard over the painful wailing of saws being tortured. When 3:30 rolled around we threw the saws back in the truck, and went home. And I still swear to this day that I heard Fred singing at the top of his lungs as he rolled out of the lane in a cloud of black smoke, which may have been his crankshaft eating some gaskets. Monday when we got to work, we rolled out to the job site, and Duncan fired up the mammoth Stihl to crash a huge hickory tree in the middle of the woods. He began to cut, or should I say grind, the tree. The wood was smoking from the terrible amount of friction from a saw that was as dull as it could get. Duncan stopped, he checked the chain, he got another saw and checked the chain, dull. He went through every saw and checked chains, getting redder and redder. He walked over to me and Fred. Fred, Blake, why is every saw dull? To which Fred responded, well Duncan, you told us that you don't give a duck which saw we used, so we used them all. That shouldn't be an issue, right, since you don't give a duck. To which Duncan sighed, knowing exactly what we did, and walked off to sharpen all the saws again. Fred was and always will be my hero and my best friend. He is currently back to living the retired life of working on cars and fishing. Many days I miss him and his offhanded comments, but I am carrying on his legacy of smartassery. Disclaimer: Duncan is not a bad boss at all, in fact he is the best boss I've ever had. He just has the mindset that time is money and that some things should go faster than they possibly ever could. Next one is titled, He Gets Exactly What He Asked For. This happened when I, 20, at the time, female, was a junior in college. Here's some context. I had taken a long weekend trip to Florida with a friend of mine to visit her brother and go to the Universal Studios Fright Night Halloween event, which was awesome, by the way. We had an amazing trip, and we were on the plane about to head home. This was only my second ever time with air travel. We didn't have much when I was growing up, so vacations were not a regular thing, and the ones we took were low-key. So, there I was, just excited to be flying in my coach seat, waiting to take off. And we kept waiting. It became clear that there was a problem with the plane when the flight attendants started calling various passengers to exit to be placed on different flights so they'd make their necessary connections. Eventually, after around 40 minutes, it was just my friend and I plus around 6 other people. And then it was our turn to leave the plane. We were sort of near the end of the group tromping back out into the waiting area. One couple, probably in their mid-50s, had stormed up ahead of us, and by the time my friend and I emerged from the gate entrance, the rude husband was already berating the pair of attendants, who, to their credit, remained poised and calm. They tried to reassure him, but he was talking over them. This is unacceptable. You better get me the same seats we had on that flight. He had the first row in coach, the one with no seats in front of it and therefore with extra legroom. By then, the rest of us had gathered around, and the attendants began addressing the whole group, offering reassurances, filling us in that there was a critical problem with the plane, which made me very glad for the change, despite the inconvenience. The rude husband was going off through all of this, and when the attendants left to make arrangements for us all, he and his wife sat there and he continued his commentary to his poor wife, unacceptable. How dare they, better have same seats, and so on. Shortly, the attendants returned, and the man practically rushed them. I demand you make this right. The attendant smiled and said, You guys are all set, sir, and she smiled at him specifically. I'm very happy to tell you that we have a flight leaving shortly, and we were able to give you and your wife the exact same seats as you had booked on the previous flight. Rude husband. I should hope so. That's the least you can do. And he huffily returns to his seat. Meanwhile, the rest of us are just waiting. The attendant then turns to us, and she says, and I'm happy to let everyone else know that you'll all be flying first class with us today. Rude husband was furious and immediately jumped up to demand why they weren't flying first class while the rest of us just sat there in a state of stunned glee. The attendant just informed the man that she'd given him his request, and didn't stick around for more abuse. The wait wasn't long, and soon my friend and I were boarded into the unicorn, fabled place that is first class. As a poor, air travel newbie, it was like some fantasy land, huge seats, real hot washcloths, and though we were underage and couldn't partake of the free cocktail, we did get to choose from a basket of distinctive Pepperidge Farm cookies. And the food. We got a whole meal, which was truly delicious, with real crystal salt and pepper shakers at each place setting and actual metal cutlery. Meanwhile, rude husband is irate. My friend and I were in the last row of first class, which only had around 8 seats, and we could hear him heaping abuse on the coach attendants, going off on how those kids don't deserve first class and how they should have gotten them. They're older, they should be respected, not some kids. Someone else who was in first, not from our original plane, caught on and was quite tickled with the man's ire. Then, the best part of all happened. The flight attendant in our section overheard rude husband's tirade, with language specifically directed at my friend and me. Who do those kids think they are? As unworthy of the honor he should have been granted. The attendant shook his head and addressed me and my friend. I'm sorry about that. Let me take care of this for you. And he closed the curtain to the coach cabin. Rude husband realized what was happening, which makes it even getter. I got one last look at his red, irate face before he was gone forever. It was glorious. Next one is titled, Thousands of Dollars Turned to Rocks. I work for a large chain hardware store. Also important to note that I don't get yelled at work. Most people don't yell at some with my body size and composition. Today we had trucks drop off some concrete and non-treated lumber for the building materials department. I work in this department. Both of these categories of product cannot get wet. If they do, they cannot be sold or must be sold at reduced price. The bundles of wood and pallets of concrete are unloaded shortly before I get to work and clock in the afternoon to work a closing shift. So I arrive and all this product is outside. This is normal. I check the weather and have about 3 hours until rain is forecast. Okay, it will be close, but I can get it done in the time frame. So I begin. I bring inside a few pallets while also helping customers. We are mildly understaffed today. Well, Mr. Manager says the pallets cannot be inside because they block the aisles. This is the issue. We don't have enough employees in my department to work product and help customers. He is correct about policy saying not to block the aisles, but we do this all the time so we can work together on product and help customers. Doing both is part of the job. I wanted a clear answer. My associates and I all want a clear answer. So 30 minutes into me working, it begins to absolutely downpour with crazy lightning, about 2 hours before it was forecast in the weather. So instead of all the product being inside, it was outside, so it would not block in aisles. I normally would not let this happen and just bring it inside and take getting chewed out. But today I figured, if I was going to get chewed out, I was going to get chewed out for following the rules. So product is outside and it's raining sideways. Manager now is not happy. The forklift is also outside and covered in rain only because he doesn't like it being inside, and half of the lumber and concrete is already toast. He then asked why it was all outside in the rain. I reminded him about what he told me and also reminded him about the operating procedures that he was angry with me for not following the previous times I have blocked aisles with product to keep it out of the rain. At this point 50% the concrete bags are saturated through and begin to harden into just big rocks. And all the MDF and particle board is blistering and falling apart. So he gets to explain why the store had a couple thousand in markdowns today to his boss. And his boss like me, so I doubt any of this will even come back to bite me. Feels good. Next one is titled, If They're Not Listening to You Then You Need to Make Sure They Do. I have a coworker who is one step higher than me in hierarchy at work. Nobody likes her. She's rude, mean, easy to snap at you and generally kinda dumb to be honest. She likes to blame me all the time for everything that's done wrong in my department and she comes after me for it. One time she told me, if they're not listening to you when you tell them to do something, then next time you need to make sure they do. I don't think you're telling them anything. This coworker has a tendency to leave expired food or various things in one of the areas I work in and I ask her not to. She shrugs it off and tells me to put it away since it's in my area. This has happened twice before she gave me that little bit of advice. So the next time it happened, I went to our boss, told him what's what, and then I went to her and made sure she was listening and asked if she knew about the food, and she said condescendingly, "Yeah, I left it back there." And I cut her off and said, "Well, you need to stop. That area is not for expired food or snacks or toys." I thought that's what the back room was for, but I guess not. Maybe that's on me. If you leave something in my area that doesn't belong there, then you need to take it out. Before she could snap at me, she saw my boss right there and he asked if she was listening. She told me to make sure I was being listened to. Let's see if it happens again. Last one is titled, Crossing Your Legs Isn't Military. Little backstory. I, 23 female at the time, joined the military in 2006, injured out within a year. Also, I'm only 4 feet 11 inches, 152 centimeters. During the first few weeks of basic training, my platoon was all brought down to the eye doctors on base to make sure our sight was within whatever range it's supposed to be. My last name at the time started with an A, so I was one of the first ones taken in, and then left waiting in the hallway on the row of chairs that were screwed in against the walls. I can never get comfortable in plastic chairs, because I'm so short and everything is too tall for me. To make myself comfortable, I slumped in my chair a little bit and crossed my legs so that the edge of the plastic wasn't digging into the back of my leg. After a few minutes I'd switch legs. The master corporal was sitting on the other side of the hallway on another chair, waiting for the rest of the recruits to finish as well. We were a platoon of about 60 people, so it was going to be a while. He looks me over and in an authoritative voice says, "Crossing your legs isn't military, uncross them." I studied him for a couple of seconds, surprised and not entirely sure if he was just throwing another short joke at me or not. Who cares how someone sits? Seeing that his expression wasn't changing, he wasn't backing down on his stance. So I uncrossed my legs and pushed myself to the back of the chair so that I was sitting up straight. The catch was that my feet were dangling well off the floor. I just kept looking at MC the whole time, swinging my feet to keep the circulation flowing. He eventually got up from his chair and left the area, so I was able to return to a more comfortable sitting position. Thanks for listening.